Upstream system constraints are rewriting procurement risk. Historically, procurement risk was addressed downstream. Exposure was measured through supplier concentration, pricing dynamics, and logistics reliability, with procurement responsible for managing the fallout. That framing no longer holds. In 2026, procurement risk is increasingly forming before sourcing decisions begin, shaped by system-level constraints that procurement teams neither own nor directly control, but now must absorb. CPO's concerns about supply disruptions reflect the often unpredictable nature and potentially existential impacts of these events, said Andrea Greenwald, Senior Director Analyst in Gartner's supply chain practice. They are coming to understand that the reactive measures they have employed to manage risks over the past 4 years will not be sufficient for the next 4. Risk is forming earlier than procurement models expect. The most consequential supply risks are no longer emerging during contract execution. They are forming upstream, inside energy systems, infrastructure availability, and regulatory capacity. By the time procurement is asked to evaluate suppliers, feasibility has often already been decided. Power access, grid timelines, permitting exposure, and infrastructure readiness are setting boundaries that no RFP can override. This is not a failure of sourcing strategy. It is a mismatch between how procurement risk has traditionally been modeled and where constraint now lives. Energy has become a precondition, not an input. Energy availability has emerged as one of the clearest examples of upstream constraint reshaping procurement outcomes. Suppliers may meet technical and commercial requirements, yet still struggle to operate if power access is delayed, constrained, or uncertain. Manufacturing capacity, processing facilities, logistics hubs, and data-intensive operations increasingly rise or fall on grid access. In regions facing congestion or extended interconnection timelines, supplier viability becomes conditional long before negotiations begin. Procurement teams are being asked to assess suppliers whose limitations are structural, not contractual. Susan Uthayakumar, Chief Energy and Sustainability Officer at Prologis, provides insight into the importance of just this. Energy is the new fault line in global supply chains. A majority of companies faced energy disruptions last year, and most expect their power needs to surge in the years ahead. The companies that solve for energy resilience will be the ones that stay ahead. Optionality is shrinking, even when choice exists. Supplier diversification has long been procurement's primary defense against disruption. Today, upstream constraints are eroding how much protection optionality can provide. Multiple suppliers may exist on paper. Fewer remain operationally viable under current energy, infrastructure, and regulatory conditions. Location now matters more than it did even a few years ago. Where a supplier operates and whether that location can support energy needs, permitting timelines, and future expansion can outweigh traditional advantages such as price or scale. As a result, procurement leverage is weakening, not because of negotiation failure, but because the pool of feasible suppliers is narrowing. The risk procurement is inheriting. This shift places procurement leaders in an increasingly difficult position. They are being held accountable for risks created upstream by decisions made elsewhere. Digital growth plans, facility siting choices, regulatory commitments, often without early visibility or meaningful influence. Energy exposure becomes embedded in supplier contracts. Timeline risk hardens before procurement is engaged. Infrastructure dependencies surface only after commitments are made. These are risks that cannot be fully priced, hedged, or negotiated away. What procurement leadership looks like going into 2026. The implication is not that procurement must solve upstream constraints alone. It is that procurement leadership now begins earlier. Risk evaluation is moving ahead of sourcing. Feasibility questions are becoming as important as price. Engagement with energy planning, infrastructure readiness, and regulatory exposure is becoming part of the procurement mandate. In this environment, procurement is less about optimization and more about viability. The defining question is no longer who can supply, but who can operate under the system constraints now shaping the market. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.